Hello and welcome once again. In this series of videos, we use local or traditional knowledge coming out of the tiny island of St. Lucia in the Caribbean Sea, located near Barbados, St. Vincent and Martinique. And we use that local knowledge from the Creole culture and Creole language, and we try to give it understanding and meaning and situate it in a global context. So today we'll be dealing with a very famous individual. So remember Long John Silver from the book Treasure Island by the Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson? The famous pirate Long John Silver with the peg leg from Treasure Island, that book, very famous book. What if I told you there was a real life peg leg pirate from the 16th century, and his name, that was a French pirate named Francois Leclerc. He made a small island called Pigeon Island his base, which is an islet off of the north coast of St. Lucia. An island notorious for having snakes, scorpions, and as the Spanish put it, even cannibals, Caribs or Calinagos. He and his crew of 330 men are attributed as the first Europeans to settle the island of St. Lucia and use the nearby Pigeon Island to target Spanish treasure galleons. So Pigeon Island is a 44-acre islet located in Gros-Islet in the northern region of St. Lucia. In the middle of the 16th century, a French pirate named Francois Leclerc used Pigeon Island as his base. Once separated from the mainland, Pigeon Island once used to be separated from the mainland island of St. Lucia, and the islet was in the Caribbean Sea, but it was artificially joined in 1972 to the mainland by a man-made causeway built from excavated dirt. The British, many years later, after the peg-leg pirate Francois Leclerc had used it as his base or fort, created their own fort, Fort Rodney. And Fort Rodney was used by the British to spy on the French ships from the neighboring island of Martinique, which is to the north of St. Lucia. In 1782, Admiral Rodney sailed from Pigeon Island to defeat the French fleet in the Battle of the Saints. Now, the British greatest victory over the French during the American Revolution, because the French sided with the Americans to get to oust the British from their colonies, and their greatest victory, the British, was actually this action of the fleet in the Battle of the Saints in the Caribbean. It was called the Battle of Dominica, if I'm correct. Today, Pigeon Island is home to a major venue, to the world famous St. Lucia Jazz and Arts Festival. So that is where main stage is held in St. Lucia. But we will get back to Francois Leclerc, because peg leg and or the iconic character that Long John Silver was most likely fashioned after, Francois Leclerc, the peg leg pirate. But we'll get back to that. We're just going to give a little breakdown, for example, of how the island was supposedly discovered, and a little synopsis on the background of the island of St. Lucia. So Christopher Columbus may have sighted the island, it says, St. Lucia, during his fourth voyage in 1502, since he made landfall in Martinique, yet he does not mention the island in his log. Juan de la Costa noted the island on his map in the 1500s, calling it El Falcon. A Spanish cedula from 1511 mentions the island within the Spanish domain, and a globe in the Vatican made in 1502 shows the island as Santa Lucia. A 1529 Spanish map shows Es Lucia as well, and the Spaniards ignored the island as other parts of the New World were of greater interest to them, and it was considered to be overrun with hostile natives who were cannibals. So they did not really colonize or do much with the island of St. Lucia, Martinique, and those little islands in the St. Vincent and those islands in that area. St. Lucia is well documented as having Caribs or Calinagos, and drive-off attempted settlements on the island by early colonists and settlers. From 1602, when the Olive Branch tried to settle there, they were driven off by Caribs or Kalinagos. When the Roslin tried to do something in Praslin, they were driven off by Caribs and Kalinagos as well. So it's well documented that there were Caribs there who refused or prevented the early attempts of settlements in St. Lucia. So let's get back to Pigeon Island and Francois Leclerc. So more than 200 years before Rodney used Pigeon Island, the 44-acre islet of the coast of St. Lucia was used as a strategic base by the French pirate privateer Francois Leclerc, known as Jean de Bois, due to his wooden leg. He made Pigeon Island his pirate base, from where he attacked passing Spanish ships. In the late 1550s, this was the age that the other European kings became jealous of the raiding and pillaging that the Spanish and Portuguese were doing, sanctioned by the Catholic Church, of course. So they set off to colonize as well. By this time, the Spanish had decimated the Aztecs, the Incas, Araks, Kalinagos, Guaranis, and many other native tribes that they had encountered in the so-called New World. So they were enslaving, stealing, unaliving in the name of Roman Catholicism and Christian gods and kings. So this is what happened when they came. The Spanish and the Portuguese separated the world, they backed by the Vatican, and then they set off on taking the gold and the land from the natives in that area. So let's get back to the real life Long John Silver French pirate Francois Leclerc, known as Jean de Bois, Pegleg. He's recorded as having died in 1563, but for 10 years he pillaged and plundered the seas and had his base on Pigeon Island, the little islet that we mentioned off the north coast of the island of St. Lucia. So he is recorded as having died in 1563. He was killed in the Azores Island while hunting down Spanish treasure ships, which he did, of Panama as well. But the 10 years of hunting, the decade, he is recorded as being involved in privateering. It is important to note, in those days, these were sailors for hire, privateers, or corsairs, as they were known by the French. Sole purpose was to attack and plunder Spanish ships on behalf of the English, French, or Dutch flags. For example, they pillaged and plundered Spanish ships and colonies by leveraging the French, British, and Dutch crowns as their backers to attack the Spanish. The newcomers wanted in on the action, and the easiest way to plunder the Spanish was to have at least the flags of foreign countries flying and then using it as a pretext to attack, which the Spanish had 50 years ahead of those other European powers, so they wanted to take their gold and their money. Francois or Francis Leclerc, Jean de Bois, Pegleg, like I said, died in 1563, and he's attributed as the first pirate or the first Europeans to settle the island of St. Lucia. He's originally from Normandy, France, and he is the original Pegleg that most likely Long John Silver is fashioned after. He is often the first to board an enemy vessel during an attack or raid. He was often the first. It was this brazen style that eventually caused him to suffer the loss of a leg and severe damage to one arm while fighting the English at Guernsey in 1549. Although many pirates would have had their careers ended by such an injury, Leclerc refused to retire and instead expanded the scope of his piracy by financing the voyages and attacks of other pirates as well. He had his base on Pigeon Island, where he invited and entertained other pirate captains and their crews and made alliances and plans of attacking Spanish vessels to plunder gold. Even after suffering such a debilitating wound, Leclerc led major raids against the Spanish, who nicknamed him Pata de Polo, or Pegleg. In 1553, he assumed overall command of 7 pirate crafts and 3 royal vessels, the latter commanded by himself, Jacques de Sores, and Robert Blundell, other famous pirates. The same year, he attacked the port of Santa Cruz de la Palma in the Canary Islands, which he looted and set on fire, destroying a large number of buildings. The same strong fleet raided San Germain in Puerto Rico and systematically looted the port of Hispaniola and Cuba from south to north, stealing hides and cannons as they traveled. They sacked Santiago de Cuba in 1554 and occupied it for a month. they left with 80,000 pesos in treasure. So completely devastated was Cuba's first capital that it was soon completely eclipsed by Habana and never recovered its former prosperity. So richer booty was taken even when the Corsairs plundered Las Palmas on the Gran Canary Islands and captured a Genoese Italians involved as well. In 1560, while awaiting a Spanish treasure fleet carrying a cargo of bullion, he caused a great deal of damage to settlements along the coast of Panama. In April 1562, Protestants in several Norman cities rebelled against their Roman Catholic king. Queen Elizabeth I of England dispatched British troops to occupy Le Havre until June 1563. Leclerc joined the English invaders and ravaged French shipping. In March 1563, he asked for a large pension. Queen Elizabeth refused. He felt wounded by his pride for being that refusal, and then he went on to raid in the Spanish treasure ships near the Azores, where he died in 1563. So that was Francois Leclerc, the original peg leg, which most probably Treasure Island, the Long John Silver pirate is fashioned after. So we will be doing later on the idea of using the sack of Campeche, which is about buccaneers, in the next episodes, and we'll be looking at Campeche and buccaneering using boucan and che Campeche, which are Creole phrases or words as well. So hit the like button, it helps a lot, and stay tuned for more. Thank you very much.